Welcome to Age of the Obsolete, the weekly podcast that examines the intersection of technology, democracy, and the future of work. I'm your host, John Rovito. Tom Meltzer would play video games for up to 15 hours a day. According to Meltzer, gaming was a place where I could be anyone, do anything, save worlds, win wars, score a goal in the World Cup final. In short, be a hero instead of a lonely and unpopular teenager. For me, the world of games was safe, a place where nothing and no one could harm me, where I could die only to be reborn a second later, where I was always able to triumph over my enemies. It was a world I could fully understand and control, in contrast with being a teenager with a home life ripe with conflicts I could neither escape nor resolve. It's estimated that more than 3 million Americans, teenagers like Tom Meltzer, suffer from video game dependency.
I enjoy gaming more than life. Gaming is simple and rewarding. People care about me there more than in the real world, and I'm good at it. I've had a lot of opportunities to succeed in the real world, but I pass them up, and I feel like it's kind of hopeless now. In the back of my head, I can notice my life is degrading. It just makes me want to play more, because then I don't have to think about it as much. A day in the life for me, I generally wake up at 4 p.m. because I was up all night gaming the night before. I'll probably eat once a day just to get it over with. I don't get as hungry when I'm gaming. My body goes to the waist, go to the bathroom. I pretty much will game until I have to go to sleep, maybe even 24 hours. And even then I'll still try and stay up a little bit longer. And then just repeat the same process all over again. Game all day until the sun comes up, all night.
We have become a society addicted to our technologies. Today, the typical adult under the age of 45 owns 4 digital devices. According to Apple, users unlock their iPhones up to 80 times a day. Why? To receive a shot of dopamine, a pleasant brain chemical released when we receive an alert, push notification, or text message on our phones. And herein lies the problem. According to ex-Google employee Tristan Harris, with millions of apps competing for limited user time, push notifications, re-engagement tools, and machine learning are being used to design games and social networks that boost usage numbers by being addictive. In the modern tech mindset, addiction generates revenue.
I noticed when I was at Stanford, there was a class called the Persuasive Technology Design class, and there's a whole lab at Stanford that teaches how to apply persuasive psychology principles into technology to persuade people to use products in a certain way. So it's not about giving you all this freedom, it's about sucking you in to take your time. For any company whose business model is advertising or engagement-based advertising, meaning they care about the amount of time someone spends on the product, they make more money the more time people spend. So the game becomes, how can I throw different persuasive techniques to get people to stay, to spend as long as possible, and to come back? Have you ever been in a moment where you're sitting there and you just start using your phone to do something productive? Maybe you're in the back of a car, in a taxi, or you're on public transportation. Your phone is always giving you a way to spend time that can be more productive, more entertaining, or more stimulating than reality. I often say that this puts a new choice on life's menu that's sweeter than reality. And so we're turning to it more and more often. We check our phones about 150 times a day.
And then there's virtual reality. Entering into a digital environment draped in virtual reality can be an intense emotional experience, so rapidly that full immersion will soon be achieved. So much so that many of our senses will be hijacked to the degree that our mind believes that these digitally constructed worlds are actually real. The danger is that for far too many who are frustrated and unfulfilled, either in their careers or personal life, virtual reality will offer a far better alternative than the real world from which they wish to escape. This is especially true of environments that produce a flow state, a totally immersive mind hack that has the ability to produce a serious sense of detachment in which we retreat from the stresses and challenges of the real world for the immersive pleasures of the flow. Listen as author Stephen Coulter explains both the dangers and the appeal of a flow state environment.
So when people flow state, they talk about feeling like their senses are incredibly heightened. This is the performance enhancing aspect of norepinephrine and dopamine. Where these chemicals really come in handy is how they affect motivation, creativity, and learning. We'll start with motivation. Besides being performance-enhancing chemicals, these are obviously all feel-good drugs, right? These feel-good drugs, right? These 5 chemicals are the most potent feel-good drugs the brain can produce. As a result, flow is considered the most addictive state on Earth. Scientists don't like the word addictive, so instead they use autotelic. When something is autotelic, it is an end in itself. What it means is that once an experience starts producing flow, we will go extra to get more of it, which is why researchers now believe flow is the source code of intrinsic motivation.
Anyone doubting the addictive nature of immersive technologies need only look at this country's current opioid epidemic. Science now tells us that the neural pathways triggered while incessantly playing video games or entering into a highly immersive virtual environment are the same as those activated when users take a hit of heroin or OxyContin. Both cause the brain to release a potent cocktail of dopamine, endorphins, and other neurochemicals, all of which are highly addictive. It's this connection between drugs and escapist technologies that causes some observers to argue that technology addiction may very soon surpass drug addiction as this country's worst nightmare. If that's the case, then we're in for quite a ride if you consider the current state of the drug crisis in the United States.
It's hard to grasp the full scope and scale of the opioid crisis we are in the midst of. The numbers are staggering. Almost 500,000 Americans have died in the last 15 years from an overdose, and the majority of those involve opioids. On average, 91 Americans are still dying every single day. In that same period, the rate of addiction to opioids has shot up by almost 500%, and the availability of addiction treatment has not kept up at all. By almost any measure, this is the biggest drug epidemic in America, the number of lives lost to crack cocaine or methamphetamines. It's a crisis that took decades to create, and experts say will take a great deal of time, patience, and work to undo.
Addiction is most prevalent in those areas that are economically depressed. Recent studies reveal that as the unemployment rate increases by only 1 percentage point in any given county, the drug-related death rate rises by 3.6%. Research also shows that the unemployed are far more likely to use illegal drugs than full-time workers. What happens then if in the future the current projections hold true and a significant portion of the population is no longer able to find work due to the onslaught of automation and artificial intelligence? Will these workers also fall into depression and chronic drug use? Or even more troubling, will they by retreating on a massive scale into the numbing reality of virtual worlds? This is John Revito saying thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions or want additional information on any of the topics covered in these podcasts, please go to our website at ageoftheobsolete.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.